morning, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us for, excuse me. Thank you so much for joining us for our daily devotions through Redeeming Life Fellowship. I'm Dan. I'm the teaching pastor here at Redeeming Life, and I'm just so glad that you could join us. Today, as we're continuing our series through the Psalms, and today we're going to be looking at Psalms 120 and 121. And if you don't know, our daily devotions and our sermon series, Wednesday night stuff, follows along the Revive School reading plan, which is a reading plan designed to lead us through the entire Bible over 2 years. That takes us from the Old Testament and the New Testament back and forth. That gives us a comprehensive look of all the text of what the Bible has to say. And also in the link or in the comment section below, you should be able to find links to that reading plan. You should be able to also find our website, our Facebook page, and also places where you can support us financially for this church plant here in Whitley County, Indiana. So without further ado, we're going to look at Psalms 120 and 121. So Glenn, Bryce, Faith, Beth, Bree, Tom, take a moment, go ahead and pause the video, and let's read Psalm 120 together. So what did you think about Psalm 120? If any of you know me well, I am the sort of person by nature, I do just about everything that I can to avoid conflict at all costs. There are few things in my life, my experience, that are more uncomfortable, that get my teeth to gnash vigorously than when I realize that I have to deal with a conflict. It's like pulling teeth for me. And clearly in Psalm 120, it's a short psalm, but there's a very serious conflict. The writer of the psalm is dealing with a conflict with what seems to be one of his enemies. And one thing I do find interesting about the way in which the verse 1 is described, and look at it, it says that I call on the Lord in my distress, he answers me. And then verse 2, save me, O Lord, from lying lips and from deceitful tongues. So that the way that the psalmist is speaking, it sounds as if he's in some way suspended, as it were, between assurance on the one hand that God is actually going to hear his prayers, and the expectation of something that actually hasn't happened yet. That the deliverance that he's expecting and the justice and the vindication that he's expecting hasn't come yet. But that somehow he's suspended between assurance and expectation. That encourages me, at least on some level, when in my prayers to God in times when I have to deal with conflict, it's very uncomfortable, painful even, that I can still rest and have peace in the assurance that I can trust God with this conflict, even in the midst of the times when my deliverance, when God's answer to prayer is still forthcoming. As with many of the Psalms where the psalmist is crying out to God because of a conflict that he's having, it's important for us to not paint conflict and enemies of the psalmists that are afflicting him in this moment as he's crying out to God and writing out this psalm, to paint with a broad brush, as it were, to treat all of these enemies as the same godless, vile, disgusting, irritating enemies as we want to make them out to be. Look closely at at who this enemy is and what's the source of the conflict, or maybe put another way, what is it that's incited this conflict, that's created this hostility between this man and his enemy? It centers, it seems, upon the enemy's weapon of choice. Can you spot it in the text? What is the psalmist's enemy afflicting the psalmist with? What is the enemy's weapon of choice? It comes through, I think, in verses 2 through 3. Save me, O Lord, from lying lips and from deceitful tongues. What will he do to you? And what more besides, O deceitful tongue? Almost sounds like Tolkien in The Lord of the Rings, the character Grima Wormtongue, when he's referring to somebody by name with this this description that denotes his character, lying lips. The weapon of choice that's afflicting the psalmist, if you wanted to summarize it in a single word, is slander. The psalmist is being slandered. His reputation is being marred by saying things that are just not true. And I think if there's any time that you or I can, with the advent and the explosion of social media and the cyberspace being smothered with reports of he said, she said, he said sort of thing, that it's very hard, it seems anymore, to be able to get at the truth of who people are, what they do, and how we should perceive them. That to get at the truth and to know what it is that we believe about people, that it is not slander, is very difficult. But even jumping down to a person, well, rather, back up on that level, you can also see the way in which slander, saying things about people that aren't true, incites conflict, even war between people. Surely, you and I know the experience of when somebody you trusted said something about you that just wasn't true. How quickly that can turn a friendship into that has a way of taking people who were formerly friends and suddenly turning them into enemies. That's the power of slander. I want to make this clear in no uncertain terms, that the Bible is so in touch with the reality of circumstances that if we live life long enough and we love the truth and we seek justice, dealing with enemies is going to be inevitable. But how we deal with our enemies and how we treat them is the real question. And how it is that we can actually love justice and hopefully bring about reconciliation and restoration, peace between enemies. And the Bible says a lot about how it is that we should treat our enemies. We are always to love justice. We are always to seek justice. We are to, as Jesus said, to love our enemies and pray for those who persecute us. But never, in any circumstances, is it pleasing to God to slander our enemies. To say things about those who afflict us, to say things about them that aren't true, to tarnish their reputation, to make their egregious deeds more vile and more treacherous than they actually are. We are never in a position, it never pleases the heart of God to speak lies about people, even when they mistreat us. But God is a God of truth. God is a God of justice. And his people should always have the truth upon their lips, and to love the truth. Slander is never fitting for the people of God. So I cannot stress that point deeply enough. But let's look at some of the vivid and popping imagery that's in here that is admittedly foreign to us, but if we look at it, it helps us grasp the sort of thing that the psalmist is trying to get at. This is the psalmist speaking of how God is going to punish this deceitful tongue. He'll punish you with warrior sharp arrows. That's simple enough. With burning coals of the broom tree. That, I admit, at my first reading, is a little strange, not least because when I think about either defending myself, against my enemies, that taking up coals of trees is my weapon of choice. I've actually just discovered hardwood coal that burns hotter and longer than traditional briquettes. I love smoking meat and barbecuing. I can't wait to have you over so that we could all have an enormous barbecue on my smoker. So if that doesn't whet your appetite, I don't know what will, except maybe if you're vegan, then we'll give you some salad. But I digress. Hot coals, you don't mess with them. And if you are wanting to punish and afflict somebody, yes, a burning hot coal from a broom tree, is a formidable weapon. I can assure you that. Listen to verse 5. Woe to me that I dwell in Meshech, that I live among the tents of Kedar. Do you have any idea about where Meshech or Kedar actually is? One of the things that you'll notice is that that there is no Meshech or Kedar in the land of Israel. To find Meshech, you have to go all the way up north, reaching into Asia Minor, which is modern-day Turkey, to find the location of former Meshech. And Kedar is all the way east in Arabia. So you can get the idea where he's talking about dwelling in these places that are not only far away from the land of Israel, but far away from each other. Meshech and Kedar are very, very distant places. But he's referring to them that I dwell in Meshech and live among the tents of Kedar. That it's a way of speaking about how even when you're in close proximity to spatially, whether you're living in the same home, the same house, the same geographic area where you're rubbing shoulders with other people, that even though you're close in spatially, because of slander, you might as well be just as far away from Asia Minor as from Arabia, as from Israel. That you have indeed become enemies. The problem, it seems, that he's dealing with is that he has to live among these men who, because of their love for slander and besmirching the name of the psalmist, that these people hate peace. But he wants to be a man of peace. And it says, but when I speak, they are for war. It's a sad truth that even for when we put forth our honest and forthright and thoroughgoing efforts for peace with our enemies, there may not be reconciliation. That sort of thing has to be left in the hands of God. But what is it that we should be faithful to do? From what I can read in Psalm 120 is that we should love peace, and to love peace is part and parcel with loving the truth. Think about what George MacDonald once said that, to give truth to him who loves it not is only to give him more multiplied reasons for misinterpretation. It's one thing to tell the truth. It's another thing to love the truth, because when you love the truth, you will testify to it at all costs, because God is a God of truth. Let me encourage you, for whatever it is that you're dealing with regards to enemies and facing slander, and even representing a certain position, be it liberal, conservative, Democrat, Republican, libertarian, Packers, Bears, you name it. For what you say and what you write on the internet, is it truthful? Are you speaking the truth about whoever it is that you're talking about? Do you love truth more than you love triumph over your foes? We desperately need, among all things, to be people who live by the truth because they love the truth, and will not be undone or captivated by slander and lies. So that's a lot in just a few verses. But yeah, that's Psalm 120. So next, go ahead and pause. Let's read Psalm 121. I'll get a sip of coffee and we'll go from there. Psalm 121. If I could describe or summarize what kind of a psalm Psalm 121 is, or what it is about specifically, you could probably summarize it pretty well, that it is a psalm of God's watchfulness. And what we mean by watchfulness is that, well, this is where having some kind of understanding of pagan gods and how they differ from the God described who's revealed through Scripture is actually pretty important. When you think about the occasion of Elijah and the prophets of Baal, where Elijah is serving as a prophet in the northern kingdom of Israel that has gone apostate, has rejected the God of Israel and wanted to follow their own gods, wanted to serve the Baals. He essentially calls all the prophets of these idols and these foreign gods to a showdown, to say, let the real God show himself by answering with fire from heaven to either consume your altar. If Baal is God, let him answer from fire down from heaven and consume this sacrifice. But if Yahweh is God, let him answer from fire, or with fire from heaven, and consume this sort of thing. And Elijah says, now you go first. And they are crying out to Baal that he would answer from heaven and consume this sacrifice with fire from heaven. And Elijah then taunts them and saying, where is your God? Maybe he's asleep. Maybe, he's away on a journey. What Elijah is taunting to these people about their idols assumes something very specific that people are led to assume, that pagans are led to assume about these foreign gods, is that these gods do sleep. There are things that preoccupy their time and their attention, that they could be looking one way in one moment and one way in the next. They are not omniscient. They don't know everything. They are not omnipotent. They're not all powerful. They're powerful, but that doesn't make them any less finite. There are gods that you put to sleep, and then wake them up in the morning and give them, libations because they get thirsty and they get hungry. They're contingent. That's the nature of the idols that people are accustomed to worshiping in the land surrounding Israel. You have then in Psalm 121 a demonstration of how profoundly different God is, because he is indeed a God who actually watches over his people. And if somebody is watching over over his people, that implies certainly a level of steadfast commitment and relationship and presence between the living God and his chosen people. And it's within that context that the psalmist is placing his trust in this God of Israel, who's revealed himself to Israel, who demonstrates his steadfast love and his justice and his righteousness and his mercy and his grace and his compassion on these people. It's a kind of love that he can trust because God is a watchful God. What I think, one of the points, if we're looking over it, yes, the Lord watches over you. The Lord is your shade at your right hand. The sun will not harm you by day, nor the moon by night. The Lord will keep you from all harm. He will watch over your life. The Lord will watch over your coming and going, both now and forevermore. There's at least, I think, one important point that we need to make before we close, is that with regards to watchfulness, it's easy to read a psalm like Psalm 121 or Psalm 23 or Psalm 91 and interpret it in such a way that because God is watchful, therefore every measure of difficulty and trial and tribulation and struggle and angst and even feelings of deep and dark despair will somehow vanish. And perhaps there will be a day when all of that vanishes, when God returns to restore and renew all of creation. Oh, how I long for that day. I don't think that Psalm 121 is meant to be interpreted that God is a God who spares us from all suffering, but rather he does watch over us through it, in the midst of it. Just recently, the past 2 days, our house has been running back and forth, inside and out, and the neighbors, children everywhere. And it's interesting, always fun, I think fun to watch the way in which children interact with their parents. Because what's interesting about that is that from the height of where the children stand, they don't have the capacity or the wisdom or the experience or the understanding about what is desirable but could still be harmful. And on the other side, what is painful but still necessarily beneficial for them. A parent knows that giving their children ice cream for their meals, for free meals a day for their children, may be giving them what they want, but is actually doing them harm. And conversely, that children may have to suffer through doing chores and doing homework and not sulking or snapping at their siblings, or getting mad and just destroying other people's property. They have to learn and to suffer through those sorts of things because it's for their own good. A good parent who can exercise that kind of intimate judgments that help a child, a son or daughter, flourish and reach their full potential happens precisely because the parents are watchful for their own good. I do believe that with a psalm like Psalm 121 helps us grasp to what degree and to what profound lengths that we know that we can trust God with our very lives, because he is a watchful God who does not slumber, he does not sleep, he does not die. But he is a God who lives, and he is ever watchful. If there's anyone that we can trust with our lives and our comings and goings, it's the living God. It's Jesus, as he said, who is the good shepherd, who knows his sheep and his sheep know me, and that he will lose not one of us. That's the kind of God I want to trust my life to. A God who, in the midst of my stumblings, is a God who never lets me fall beyond his reach, who desires my good, who desires all of our good, and that I can trust my complete life to him. So, yeah, those are Psalms 120 and 121. I hope that for you and I, these have been instrumental in helping us cultivate a living relationship with God, both personally and corporately, as you and I, as the church. Once again, thank you so much for joining us. It's been a pleasure. I look forward to the day or the time when you get to be able to meet with us in person, that we can unpack these scriptures in more detail, be it on Sunday or Wednesday. It's exciting. If you haven't yet, go ahead and click subscribe to these videos so that you can continue to follow along with our daily devotions. And I love you all very much, and look forward to seeing you next Monday. So God bless you guys.